Every year, over 10% of elderly individuals experience some form of abuse or violence. But what if the next victim was someone in your own family? A 98-year-old woman, alone in her Ohio home, never expected danger to be lurking so close. But what happened next is something that has left an entire community shaken. This grandmother, who was 98 years old, was about to be killed by the man who was recording the video. On April 9, 2018, 3 days later, Howard Leisure frantically called the Ohio police to report his aunt, 98-year-old Margaret Douglas, missing. Did he target the elderly before? Was there a social media post, a journal entry, or a message that hinted at his intentions? What you think? Share your thoughts in comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe my channel for more terrifying stories. Police immediately launched a search. At nearly a century old, Margaret Douglas was considered highly vulnerable. Officers started by combing through her house, calling her name, but silence was all they found. Expanding their efforts, police questioned neighbors and searched the surrounding area. The investigation revealed that Margaret was last seen alive at her house on April 5th, and her family hadn't heard from her since April 3rd, nearly a week before the search began. By the evening of April 9th, the search hadn't turned up anything. That's when Margaret's nephew, Howard, and his wife, Cindy, arrived to help. Since Margaret never had children of her own, her nieces and nephews took on the role of caring for her like she was their own mother. They knew her routines well, the red wallet she always carried, the way she dressed when she stepped outside. Howard checked the closet and found clothes scattered on the floor. Digging through the pile, his hand brushed against something cold. It was Margaret's favorite shoes. As he tried to pick the shoe up, Howard uncovered what would haunt him for the rest of his life. The shoe was still attached to Margaret, who was in the closet. Margaret's lifeless body was forced inside the closet. The space was just 1.5 by 2.5 feet. She was wearing her nightgown, which was torn. Bruises covered her head, and marks on her neck suggested she had been strangled. Margaret was positioned with her head down in the corner and her backside kind of up in the air. Her underpants were torn. Inside the closet, her nightgown was all unsnapped, and her bra was pulled up. I immediately thought that there was a sexual element to the crime. But that wasn't all. Police found a jar of blackberry jam in the living room. It appeared to have been used, but not for food. Later tests revealed male DNA inside the jar. It had been used as a lubricant in a sexual assault. Howard was devastated. He never thought his beloved aunt would die like this. And I pretty much lost it, something I'll never forget. I'm sorry, but to find her like that, what kind of monster could do this to a 98-year-old woman? For what? Would he get the death penalty? Stay tuned to find out. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell. Now, let's get back to the case. Born on September 15, 1919, in Akron, Ohio, Margaret Douglas grew up with 2 sisters and a brother. By 2018, she had outlived all of them. Over her nearly 100 years, Margaret witnessed monumental changes in the world, from the Great Depression and World War II to the moon landing and the fall of the Berlin Wall. She spent almost her entire life in Ohio, working at O'Neill's department store in Akron during her youth. The job suited her social nature, giving her the chance to meet many people and forge lasting friendships. After the war, Margaret married Donald Douglas, an Army veteran who worked for the Ohio Match Company. Together, they moved into their Wadsworth home, where they built a life filled with simple joys, traveling, watching Cleveland Indians games, and gardening. Though they never had children, their life was fulfilling. Donald passed away in 2000, but Margaret stayed in their home, finding comfort in familiar surroundings and a friendly neighborhood. Tragically, it was in that very house where her life was brutally taken. Forensics meticulously combed through the scene, gathering DNA and fingerprints. They tested the samples against Margaret's family members, but none matched. Whoever had done this was still unknown. Detectives began leaning toward the theory of a burglary gone wrong. Margaret's red wallet was missing, and while there were no signs of forced entry, it wasn't unusual. At 98, Margaret leaned on her support system. Her niece and nephew helped with groceries, while her neighbors would often check on her. Margaret rarely locked her doors. She trusted those around her and never imagined anyone could wish her harm. The only other clue found at the scene was a discarded plastic glove lying in the backyard. To investigators, it hinted at chilling intent. The killer likely wore the glove to avoid leaving fingerprints or DNA, but in a hurried escape, they carelessly dropped it. This raised unsettling questions. Was Margaret specifically targeted? Had the crime been premeditated? Seeking answers, detectives turned to her family. They needed to know if anyone had a motive. Both Margaret's niece and nephew confirmed that she wasn't wealthy and had written a will, so there was no financial incentive tied to her death. Moreover, Margaret wasn't the kind of person to make enemies. Her life had been long, quiet, and full of meaningful connections. In fact, her murder sent shockwaves through the tight-knit community. Everyone was on edge, desperate for answers. Do you think laws protecting seniors are strong enough? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe my channel. For another shocking case that left a community in fear, watch this video next. As police expanded their search, they discovered a pattern of recent car break-ins in the area. Small items, spare change, nothing significant. But something odd happened. Police quickly noticed a man loitering near Margaret's house, smoking a cigarette, and watching the scene closely. It turned out to be David Klinkenbeard, Margaret's neighbor, who had failed to return police calls. Though he no longer lived in the neighborhood, he admitted he had been keeping an eye on the investigation, even conducting his own inquiries. This struck the police as strange. How did he know details that hadn't been made public, such as where Margaret's body had been found and what she was wearing? On April 11th, 2 days after Margaret's body was discovered, officers brought David Klinkenbeard in for questioning. He claimed to have last seen Margaret on April 4th when he helped her bring in her trash cans. On April 8th, he went to her house again, but when she didn't answer the door, he assumed she wanted privacy. Before leaving, he greeted another neighbor. By that time, Margaret had already been dead. This timeline added to investigators' suspicions. But when they tested David's DNA against the sample from the glove found in the backyard, it didn't match. David was cleared. He wasn't the killer, just a worried friend trying to figure out what had happened. Despite ruling David out, investigators weren't entirely back to square one. They still had another potential lead, a string of car break-ins in the area. And then, something unusual happened. On April 16, 2018, police brought Gavin back in for questioning. This time, he couldn't deny what he had done. About it, do you ruin my life? So, when she died, was she on the couch or on the floor? Were you her? Did you squeeze her or push her against the floor? They asked. You don't remember? She wasn't fighting back. When you were holding your hand over her, you might have pushed too hard and maybe made those pleas. Gavin gave a chilling account of the night he killed Margaret. He had never been inside Margaret's house before, until the night he killed her. He claimed he only went out that night to rob unlocked cars. But as he passed Margaret's house, he noticed her sleeping through the window. On impulse, he tried the back door. It was unlocked. Once inside, he began recording her as she slept on the couch. As he crept closer, he accidentally bumped into a chair, waking Margaret. She immediately started screaming. According to Gavin, he panicked when he saw her reaching for her phone. He didn't know what else to do, so he strangled her. Once she was dead, he admitted to stuffing her body into the closet and covering it with a pile of clothes to keep it hidden. The investigators listened patiently as Gavin tried to blame his actions on adrenaline and confusion, gently encouraging him to share more. Then, he made an even more disturbing admission. Gavin revealed that he had known Margaret before. When things in his life went downhill, he lived just around the corner from her. As a younger kid, he had been friendly and helpful, often assisting neighbors, including Margaret, by shoveling their driveways in winter. But that past connection meant nothing. She was still a target. If the police hadn't caught Zach, and if Zach hadn't pointed them to Gavin, this horrifying crime might have gone unsolved. Gavin could have walked free, never facing justice for the brutal murder of an old lady. In the end, it seemed they had stopped a future serial killer before he could strike again. Gavin was arrested, and a search warrant was executed on his home. Inside, police discovered gloves matching the type found in Margaret's backyard. They also recovered Margaret's missing red wallet, which Gavin had taken as a twisted trophy, alongside evidence linking him to Paul's carjacking. A stolen bottle of Hollister cologne. Officers found something even more disturbing, a journal filled with chilling entries. Gavin had written biographies of notorious serial killers and detailed his own violent fantasies. One entry read, "I just want to go off on someone and beat them until they're not breathing anymore. I honestly want to take someone's life. I want to know what it would feel like to stand over someone's dead body." Necrophilia is said to be rare, or at least we hope it is. But figuring out just how rare is difficult because most people with such tendencies don't openly admit them. Still, it's common enough for experts to create 10 classifications of necrophiles. Class 1 includes those who don't seek corpses, but are aroused by fantasies of sexual encounters with one. They may even engage in role play with willing partners, pretending to be dead. Class 2 involves those who commit necrophilia due to emotional attachment, such as sleeping beside a dead body. The classifications grow darker as they progress, with Class 9 involving homicidal necrophiles, those who kill to have a corpse. The most extreme is Class 10, those exclusively attracted to corpses, who will kill repeatedly to obtain bodies and cannot experience arousal without one. While necrophilia remains rare, studies show that those with such urges are often drawn to certain jobs, like hospital orderlies, morgue attendants, funeral home assistants, and cemetery workers. Of course, most people in those roles are just doing a job, but for a small group with dark tendencies, these environments are appealing. That's why it raised eyebrows when police found out that a year before the murder, at 16 years old, Gavin applied for a job at a local funeral home. When that plan failed, he hunted for victims on the streets instead. At 17 years old, Gavin was charged as an adult with aggravated murder, aggravated burglary, kidnapping, and abuse of a corpse. To keep the focus on Margaret's case, the DA chose not to pursue charges related to the carjacking. Gavin was arraigned in June 2018, initially pleading not guilty. However, after his legal team's motions to suppress evidence from his phone were denied, he changed his plea to guilty in November 2018. Before sentencing, Gavin underwent psychological evaluations and was diagnosed with several disorders, including conduct disorder and sexual sadism disorder. His mother tried to defend him, blaming his actions on a new prescription for Zoloft, which Gavin had started taking in January 2018. However, investigators pointed out that many of the most disturbing entries in his journal had been written before he ever started the medication. The court didn't accept this explanation as a mitigating factor. At his sentencing hearing, Gavin addressed the court, repeating many of the same words he had used during his police interview. "I'm so sorry for what I did. I constantly live in bad shame because of it." Yet, he never once referred to Margaret as a real person. He only spoke of it and what he'd done, showing little genuine remorse. The judge didn't believe his apology was sincere. Since he was 17 when he committed the murder, he wasn't eligible for the death penalty. Instead, the court sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. However, in 2021, Ohio passed Senate Bill 256, which banned life sentences without parole for juvenile offenders. This law means that Gavin can appeal for parole after serving 25 years, making him eligible for release as early as 2043. Margaret's family strongly opposes this possibility. Her great-niece wrote, "There are criminals who cannot be reformed. Gavin Ramsey is one of them. The law needs to be amended to recognize individuals like Gavin Ramsey, who have shown an irredeemable evil, a kind of evil that cannot be rehabilitated, and ensure that justice is served." In accordance with the U.S. Supreme Court's ruling on juvenile life without parole, as it stands, Gavin will remain behind bars until at least 2043, when he may appeal for parole. But what do you think about this horrific case? Should someone like Gavin ever have the chance at freedom? Feel free to share in the comments. If there's a case you're interested in, let us know. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.